Good evening, everybody. Welcome back. Christopher Ruocchio here of Sun Eater. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I feel like it's been a while. I know it's been a month, but it feels like a very long month. I don't quite know. Don't quite know why, but it's good to see everybody. I'm good to see everybody. See some new names. Bob Evelyn, hello. Erection, hello. Doombot, welcome back. Samuel, welcome back. I saw Casey and Orion too, and Isaac's here. Sir Galahad, a bunch of the old familiar faces. Calvin, hey everybody, Frank, Zen of course, and Master Mel Rubius. Hey everybody. Hope everyone's doing well. So if I saw there's some question, answer this in the chat a little bit about spoilers. Usually we're pretty good about spoilers in here. So if you are new, you can hang out, totally fine. If we do get to a spoiler question, what I do is not read the question, and I say, hey, Steven, I see your question. And then I give everybody a couple seconds. I have this little chyron that I put up that says spoiler talk. And if you want to just mute, I will take it away when we are done. So you can hang out and not hear the spoiler. But that being said, we don't even necessarily do that once. It doesn't happen that often. Especially because I've had this increasing sense that I have said too much in past years, and I'm sort of taking it upon myself to say less moving forward. A lot of people have very specific disquiet gods questions, and I'm not answering those. The book's job is to answer the question, right? And so I'm not going to explain what something means. Usually we do writing questions, and we do sort of general Sun Eater world questions. Nobody ever, very rarely do people ask me to explain, anything. That being said, of course, I would only, ask people to be, kind of circumspect in the comments, right? There's not a good way to censor things. It's not Discord, right? So don't just say, hey, X dies here, right? Or something like that. Just try to be a bit coy about how you ask spoiler questions. That being said, if you're reading the chat, just be careful, because some of that's just on you. So not only so much I can do about that. So let's see. And I do try to answer more or less every question in the chat. Although that's been getting harder as the number of people tuning in has been going up. So if I miss a question, feel free to ask it again. If I miss it, again, it's possible I'm ignoring it, but there's every now and then there are questions I just don't want to answer, something like that. But you can always ask. Let's see. I feel like I scrolled past the question. Sam asks, hey Christopher, how have the hardcover sales been so far? So excited for that. Never thought I'd see it. Yeah, me neither. So just to really underscore the degree to which this is weird, DAW's been around for 50 years. They've never brought a book back to hardcover that they considered out of hardcover. They've kept books in hardcover indefinitely, Name of the Wind, of course, right? Or they've done new editions or something, new cover art. But to actually just revive, a book with the same ISBN number, the same edition years later after it had been discontinued has not happened. So, you guys really moved heaven and earth on this one. I could only knock on the door repeatedly, but you all had to rush in once they opened the door. So I really appreciate it. As far as how they're doing, really pretty well. Empire Silence opened at number 30 on Barnes & Noble, all books. A 6-year-old hardcover with no advance notice or commensurate marketing push opened at number 30. It's pretty awesome. So thank you guys. That was, it was only at that ranking for a couple hours before it dropped back down, right? But that it happened at all was really cool. Daw was very happy. And so I haven't heard if they are going to do book 2 yet. They haven't made a decision so far as I know. But the data seemed to be good. So, we'll see what happens. But nothing yet. You guys will know as soon as I know and I'm allowed to tell everybody. So, hello everybody. Hello. Let's see. Jeff. Hey Jeff. Excited about the announcement for your event in Arlington with Ryan Cahill in September. I can't wait. Yeah. So in case people missed the one Facebook post I did about this because it was already sold out. I will be in Texas the first week of September. I'm going to stick around. I'm going to do more than just that one event, just me. But Ryan Cahill and I will be doing an in conversation sort of thing at Theater Arlington in Arlington, Texas. I think September 3rd. I haven't been like mentioning it at every possible interval because by the time I was invited, it was sold out. Ryan had sold the place out by himself, had nothing to do with me. So it'll be fun. Ryan's the man. We've been going back and forth ever since I was on live stream with him. We've been talking. He's a great dude. So I'm really looking forward to doing that. And then while I'm down in Texas, I figured I would go and make a couple stops. I might go. Armadillo Con is that weekend in Austin. I might go to that. It's a smaller like literary convention. It's not like Comic-Con or something like that. It's like about books. So I haven't quite decided yet. I haven't even talked to them, but I have one of Bane's editors lives there, and I might go with him. So we'll see what happens. But I will be in Texas, 100%. I will be in Dallas. I'm hoping to go to Houston and Austin as well. So so stay tuned, everybody. I will let you all know more about that as soon as I can. Let's see. Just finished Disquiet Gods, my favorite Sun Eater by far, man. Well, thank you, Chris. I really appreciate that. I really am hoping that Disquiet Gods will set a new standard for quality. I know Demon in White has its partisans, and I understand those guys. Just got the last end paper for the Broken Binding editions, which was a Demon in White end paper. So those are almost all arted, which is very cool. Which reminds me, I'll be on with Patrick Leo tomorrow at noon Eastern time. Patrick and I are going to talk about all sorts of things, but not least of which are the Broken Binding editions, because Patrick and I have been going back and forth doing all the art direction for that. Patrick's been like with Broken Binding, I think, since like the beginning, basically. And I think he's been doing all the art direction for like the Malazan books. But he's been working with me pretty closely. We've been going back and forth on everything. So those will be really cool. And speaking of special editions, Frank asks, with the out of my control delays, thank you, Frank. I appreciate that. I was so pissed, dude. It was just so, it was so upsetting. On the Diamond edition, will there be a chance to purchase a slipcase? So yes, sort of. We have the order in already, and we've like paid. So we can't like, we're not going to go back and order like another 100 or something. Like that we're not going to sell 100 more, right? But we did overprint. We've got a little bit of wiggle room. I don't know exactly how many it is, because whenever you do something like this, you overprint, right? So that you can replace damaged ones. And so there will almost certainly be a supply of remaining slipcases at the end of all of this. We will sell those. But that'll be it. We're not going to make any more than that. So the sales, by the time we had the news, basically, by the time I got the books and realized they were not good, we'd already ordered the slipcases, and the designs weren't finalized, but they were like ordered. Basically, does that make sense? And so the sort of financial ship had sailed on that one. Yeah, so there should be some extras, but we just don't know exactly where there will be, how many there will be, rather. Let's see. Ayub, it's an honor to watch Sunday Your Author live. It is an honor for you to be here. Thank you. Frank, who do I think would be the nicest dog parent of like all the characters? My like knee-jerk response is Polino. Where are all the dogs in the Silent Empire? Are there such things as Palatine dogs? Palatine dogs? No, but it's not. But you can assume that there are probably eugenically designed ones. It's an interesting point. I haven't like mentioned a dog. I've gone all this way without mentioning a dog. Strange. Cats have come up, but mostly the absence of cats have come up. But I don't think I mentioned dogs except like colloquially at all. It's a really strange lapse on my part. But I would assume that you could extend a dog's life expectancy to a certain degree. This is an interesting thing to think about. Master Mel Rubius, over the past month, I've watched a lot of my content on New Sun. I'm curious, what did I think of Long Sun, specifically the very end? So I only read Long Sun once, so I do not feel like super qualified. And it's also been a few years, but I loved it. The ending is like pretty. it's pretty abrupt. Obviously, it goes into short sun, and so in a certain sense, long sun just it doesn't stand alone. I think as atomically as new sun does. But I love it. I love Patera Silk. I love oh gosh, I love Hyacinth. I love Chenille and Alec and like all those guys. It's great. And I think too that like Wolf's like mastery of dialogue is even more on display. I just realized my good microphone is here but not plugged in. Why don't I fix that real quick? Good job, Christopher. Okay, we should be good now. But no, I think his mastery of dialogue is like even like more on display in that one. And I love generation arc stories. I love things like that. I would love to write one, but I think at this point, if I did one, people would say, "Oh, now he's copying Long Sun." So I don't know that I'm going to write. I'm going to write a generation arc story. But I like love stuff like that. The world is so cool. And of course, like more Typhon. Even obliquely is great because Typhon is such a delight in the worst possible way. Chris, thank you for the Blade Runner comment. That whole thing is just so that whole thing was just so traumatizing, I think is the right word for me. I try not to think about it at all. But I'm glad you liked it. Daniel says, unrelated question: have any Catholics tried to minister to or baptize an Ertani? They may not have had an opportunity. There's some debate in the church now as to whether or not you could baptize aliens, and it comes down to like what is an alien exactly, right? And like maybe there's some difference, and like, is it basically like, are they just another person, or are we looking at something that's not fully sentient in the same way or to the same degree, or something? And so goes sort of back and forth. The church is not ruled definitively on this, so there's some latitude here. And I think as far as like storytelling goes, like, I think this is a very interesting question. If you're maybe not religious, right? Maybe it's not an interesting question, but it's like deeply related to like the question of personhood, right? It's not that different than the question of like, is a robot a person, right? It's maybe a little bit murkier because we're talking about like an alien life form, but it depends on like how you define life form and consciousness, right? And all of these things and what those things are. So I think it's a really interesting conversation. And when I write, I try not to answer questions too didactically. I try to leave room because I've said this before. I think questions are like more interesting than answers, and I think that suggesting answers to readers that they can do whatever they want with is better for an artist. Like, an artist shouldn't be a proselytizer necessarily, or a didact. I think one of the advantages of drama over nonfiction is that you can like suggest multiple things at once, and I think that's better because life is like that, right? So this is one of those places, I think. But as far as the Ertani question specifically, I think probably Edouard is the first Museum Catholic who's ever met an Ertani. So I think that's because there aren't that many Ertani in the galaxy. We're talking about a species from one planet, unlike us, right, who are at this point from hundreds of thousands, and so the population is relatively small. So yeah, we'll see. Bug Zero would love to know how much of being a new dad influenced your writing and how much is played out according to your original plan after the first couple books. So first question first. Not so much, because most of Disquiet Gods was written before my daughter was born. There's one chapter, I think it's chapter 5, that was written after. And I think that one's probably where it's most plain. But it has had an impact, I think, somewhat on book 7, just in terms of thinking about Hadrian's relationship to Cassandra, particularly. As far as original plan, the original plan is like broadly intact, but it's been elaborated in ways I didn't expect. Like, I'm still going where I wanted to go, but like what things
mean in context, and subplots and things like that have been sort of shifted, and things that I wasn't sure would be fully on stage are fully on stage, or vice versa, right? I said this when I was talking to KC King Crusoe here in the chat, and to Dave Butler about editing Disquiet Gods. The whole Sabratha thing was not originally in the plan. I sort of thought the Watchers might stay over there and sort of keep things like down in on the proxy war, but I think getting into the bigger stuff was more interesting, if that makes sense. But the general shape of the series is unchanged, and has been unchanged since like 2015, 2014. So Stanley says, real quick, thanks for being the most interactive writer out there. Maybe Brandon Sanderson and Evil. Thank you so much. If I was a writer, I wouldn't want to do it. I hate their fans. Yeah, I don't understand that, like that last one. Even when somebody gives you good reason to not like them, so not for you as the author, or as true actors to act that way. So those writers baffle me. I don't know. It's very strange behavior. And I've been on the receiving end of that a few times, like when I was a kid and stuff. And like there are still writers. There's one writer whose books I shouldn't do this, but I hide in Barnes and Noble when I go in. I don't do it so much anymore, but I did it very regularly for a long time. I was just so it's a very petty thing to do, but I was so it's so disgusted. I stopped doing it really when I realized that was like really not fair to the bookstore employees more than anything else. It wasn't accomplishing anything, but I've been on the been on the receiving end of vitriol from people I really looked up to, and it's not a good place to be. So I really don't want to do that to anybody for any reason ever. Hey Corey, good to see you, man. Galahad asks, are any of the short stories I'm writing now more experimental, like Parable and Iron or Reincarnation? Definitely some of my best. Well, thank you. I'm especially fond of from Reincarnation. I really, 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 really like that story. Yes, one of them, not the one I'm working on right now, but the next one is a little weird. And I did one for the Endurida Books version of Murdered Son that is more like Pits of Emesh, in that it's like not canon and is like messing with people. So that one's not super experimental, but the next one's a little bit more out there. So hopefully you will like it. It'll be in Tales of the Sun Eater 4, which I have decided will actually be out this year. So I realized actually was pretty close to being able to fill out a collection. I think the stories in Tales 4 are going to get split between the first omnibus and the second omnibus, because we're getting close to being able to put those together as well. But I can get stories out now, so just make it more confusing. Trying to do my best with these short stories in a way that makes sense. But it definitely makes sense over here. But I promise you'll be able to read all the stories. There will be 2 omnibus volumes. The first one will be soon. The second one will be later. Everything will be in those. But yeah, so there is one story that's going to be a bit more experimental soon. Let's see. Munazir asks, if Sun Eater was 5 books, not 7, what would the names of the books be? They would have been Empire of Silence, Howling Dark, Demon in White, Kingdoms of Death, and then Shadows Upon Time would have been the 5. Let's see. Writing reads, we spoke briefly on Instagram. Hope you're doing well. Thanks, sir. As a writer, my question would be, how do you handle times when it's hard to get writing started some days? Well, it's okay to miss a day, right? And you don't need to beat yourself up. It's less okay for me to miss a day because, like, I owe people stuff, right? I owe you guys stuff. I owe my publisher stuff. I owe my family, me working. But it is okay to like have a bad day. And on those days, do something that like helps in some way. Like maybe you could plan something else or whatever. But the thing I do is I set a minimum daily word count for myself. So having said it's okay to skip a day, I try really, really hard not to. And so it's sort of like, it's analogous to, I remember watching Terry Crews talk about going to the gym, and he's like, the thing you should do starting out is like, just go, right? Just go, be there, like have some water, maybe like walk on the treadmill casually for 10 minutes, whatever, just like get in the habit of going, right? And the writing equivalent of that, obviously is someone who's not so good at the gym part, right? But the writing equivalent of that is like writing a minimum tolerable amount every day, and you could set that number as small as you like. It could be 100 words, right? Which is like a couple sentences. My minimum is 1,000. That way, I don't ever really stop, and it's okay. Like a bad 1,000 words, you can write over the next day, and it won't hurt that bad, right? Because eventually you'll have a really good day, and you'll write 3,000-4,000 words, and that kind of helps wash up. But setting a little minimum like that, so you can say, hey, I did something, right? That I think is a good thing, because the other thing you could do is, if you aren't an outliner, outline, like, because most writer's block is simply a result of like not visualizing the scene, and so you're sort of like writing the way that Daredevil jumps out a window where he like can't see the floor, right? And that's not great. Like you should have a plan, and I think most people, if they most pantsers probably aren't actually, and they would be better if they were outlining. And so if you aren't someone who outlines, I think, like even just writing a couple paragraphs of like trying to figure out what the plan is, I usually will like walk away from the desk and like talk through like Smeagol with myself, trying to figure out like what the problem is, because I'm a very like auditory person. So I will literally sit here in the office and like pace and like talk out loud like someone is listening, until I understand what it is I'm trying to do. Because sometimes even with the outline, like the outline's not outline enough to solve the problem. And so I need to like really think about what's going on here. And it's like okay to like have to cut something and try again. Often if I'm like really, really stuck, it's because the last like 2,000-3,000 words I've written aren't very good, and I've written myself into like a hole. And I've told my wife, like, if you hear me complain about the same thing for 3 days, tell me to delete the chapter and start over, right? So sometimes going backwards is the best way to go forwards as well. Will I please come to New Jersey, New York soon? I would love to come back. It's been a really long time since I've been up to the city. So but I don't have any immediate plans, but I would like to. Thoughts on Dune? Oh man, that's a big one. Dune was for most of my life my favorite science fiction novel. I think it's pretty obvious reading Sun Eater, right? There's a lot of sort of Dune aesthetics in the books, but I was always troubled by Frank's thesis. I think most people read Dune and they love it because it's actually a straightforward hero story. Frank Herbert claiming that it's not is crazy. He's just wrong. That's why 95% of the people who read Dune come away like, oh, Paul's awesome, right? And this is why I don't like the new movies, is because they try to adjust it to show Frank's vision instead of what Frank wrote. And what Frank wrote is better and more interesting than what Frank says he wrote. And so this is also why I think most people don't like the sequels very much, because in Dune 1, the Atreides are just good guys, the Harkonnens are just bad guys, the Emperor is just complicit in evil, and betraying his friends. And so but at the same time, Frank's critique of heroes, his critique of power, is like not invalid. It's a perfectly true, frequently critique. But at the same time, it's not fair, because not every hero, right, is dangerous or evil to the people they're trying to lead. Some people are actually good and are trying to do good. Not everybody is Napoleon or Hitler. And even Napoleon's like complicated, right? In a way that like Hitler's not complicated, right? And so I think that in a certain way, Frank Herbert's attempts to be like an adult correction to stories like John Carter of Mars is in fact like is an overcorrection. I think it's as maybe pat as John Carter is in the first place. And I love both of these characters, both of these stories. I love John Carter. But like neither of those is like really like 4-dimensional, right? And so I wanted to, with Sun Eater, try to put, I've said this before, I wanted to put the king's head back on the statue in Minas Morgul, right? I wanted to try and like reconstruct the hero that Dune attempted to deconstruct. So But no, I love Dune. I think it's great. I really really love God Emperor of Dune because it's so bizarre. It's so singular. And I love Messiah and children. I really like children actually. Children's often pretty maligned, but it's like Game of Thrones in space. It's great. But those last two books, man, Zin's gonna laugh at me. Zin always laughs at me when I slag heretics at Chapter House. But those books are gross, man. They're so gross. But as far as the adaptations, I like the Lynch movie. It's weird, but like I like weird. I love the sci-fi adaptation, and I'm not keen on the new ones. The cast is great, but like that's really like, and like it's shot really well. But that's like the extent of my nice things to say about it. I had a lot of trouble for not liking them. So you know. Yo, put the novellas on Audible. They are on Audible. You can get all three of them. Queen of Ashes is there. Lesser Devil's there, and so is Dregs Empire. They're all there. It's the short stories that aren't. The short stories aren't there, and I will put them on there when they are all in one book. The thing about the Tales of the Sun Eater ebook collections, the short ones, the short story collections, is they're like kind of really short, and I would rather sell you, it's the same reason they're not in print physically. They're only ebooks. Is I would rather sell you one book that's like, comprehensive and nice rather than than just these like the little ebooks are sort of a compromise because I had people complaining about having to go to like all the anthologies the stories got published in. So I thought, hey, I'll do this as a compromise. So they will be on Audible eventually. The short stories will be. But yeah. Anyway. Yeah, so they will be coming. Zin says we were coining the term rock slide, akin to Sanderlanche. Just state an awesome climax. And Jenna said I vetoed "We Will Rock You." I did not veto that. I love Queen and have made that joke myself at various points in my life. So I did not veto that. I also can't veto things because much to my chagrin, I am not a dictator and I can't stop you guys doing whatever it is you do on the Discord server. That's Orion's domain. I have no power there. Now Rubius, I love seeing Disquiet Gods abbreviated as DQ. Man, I don't know why that's a thing, but it's everywhere. Do they have chemical filled ice cream in the Silent Empire? No, they only have real ice cream. It's not that kind of topia. Let's see. W says, have one question. Is it possible to send Quail Ridge Books my paperback hardcovers for you to sign? No, no, that they won't accept that, I'm sure. Sorry. Have I seen any Studio Ghibli films? Most of them. Yeah, I haven't seen like I haven't seen Boy and the Heron yet, which I really want to see. I love Spirited Away. Love Prince Mononoke. I love Howl's Moving Castle. Castle Sky is great. Kiki's Delivery Service is adorable, right? Like they're great. Yeah, no, of course. I even like the Earthsea film, and with its terrible dub. It's terrible dub that nevertheless has Willem Dafoe in it. Stanley, in general, do authors see readers drop off in a series as it progresses? Yeah, 100%. This is one of the reasons you don't see a lot of really long series. And this is also why I've had so much trouble with my publishers, is because things attenuate. And my problem, essentially, to radically simplify, is that I was writing the books faster than my audience was growing. And so they were like, I'm not so sure about keeping this up, basically. Now they've learned that that calculation was an error. And so, so everything's cool now. But I'm in Raleigh area. Any more events coming up here soon? I might go to GalaxyCon downtown. I haven't decided. But failing that, for the moment, I don't have anything. But of course, I live here, so something could come up. That's the easiest place for me to do something, but nothing on the calendar just yet. The only things I have on the calendar at the moment are Texas in September, and I'm going to Virginia Beach in January. I have guest of honor at MarsCon, which is a smaller convention up that a ways. Write the third book in the Kingkiller Chronicles. No, thank you. No, thank you. I'll do my own. I'll do my own thing. But have I heard about Dune Prophecy? What do I think? I don't know. I was looking at like the character list, and it's not exactly the same as the character list in Sisterhood of Dune, the Kevin Bryan prequel spin-off novel. And so they're kind of doing their own thing, so it could go anywhere. I don't know. I like Mark Strong a lot, and the lady who's like the main Harkonnen sister was in Equilibrium, which is one of those guilty pleasure films, but I can't remember her name for the life of me. But I don't know. I don't know. As everyone knows, I'm not super jazzed about the current iteration of Dune. So we'll see. But let's see. Ray says, you once said, speaking about writing what you know, you didn't know space travel, but you know swords. What's my background in describing sword work in the books? So I did Olympic style fencing for several years, middle school, high school. I did a little bit of HEMA, and I just have like a strong historical background in sort of that area. But in terms of writing the actual fights, a lot of that's just like years of sort of personal experience, really. So I actually like mime out sword fights. I have a cane that I use and will sort of move around as I'm thinking, through the choreography, basically. Just to make sure something's not physically impossible, and of course, as like a Star Wars kid, right? I thought pretty hard about what a blade that could cut anything would actually be used like. And so I'm less interested in like how the high matter swords work scientifically, mechanically, more interested in how they change the mechanics of sword fighting. So that's sort of where my focus has been. Hadrian, of course, is like not a tech guy, so he like almost never talks about that stuff. I know you're salty about Brandon Sanderson eating your homework, but would I consider going to his convention? Yeah, sure. Yeah, of course. Well, I don't have a problem with Brandon Sanderson. It's not his fault that the printer like prioritized him over me. But it is super frustrating because I delivered the Diamond Edition files in December, and they arrived earlier this month, and then they arrived unsellable. So is just very, very big mess. But yeah, I would go to Dragonsteel. Steve and I were talking about going to Dragonsteel. I don't know if that's going to happen this year or not. Xenos Warbirds. Hadrian reveals things that will happen in the future. He's pretty specific in book 6 and says things like, "Little I know I'd never see X again." Why do I do that? Excellent question. Why would I do that? I don't know that I can like actually answer that question, but it's not because I'm just trying to automate things. I'm not just trying to like shuffle things off. There's a reason. There's a reason. And that one's it's in the book somewhere. Zach says, I got a copy of Tony Harrison's Oresteia, which I am looking forward to reading. Am I a fan of Xenophon? Absolutely. I mean, who could not be a fan of Xenophon? I'm not like it's one of those things like I don't feel like I'm qualified to say whether or not I'm a fan of Xenophon. Like Xenophon is like a real guy in a way that like I will never be. I admire Xenophon, right? I could never be Xenophon, right? But Xenophon is like people should read, Anabasis, right? Like it's super interesting. It was for the longest time like our primary textual source on Persia because there like wasn't a lot of like written material from the time period, so it's like really the best we had. No, I read it actually. I didn't read it for school. I read it relatively recently, the last few years. I went through like a Persophile phase where I was reading all about the Achaemenids and then the Parthians and the Seleucids, who of course are Greek, but Seleucids, and then the oh my goodness, the Sassanids. I'm so tired. And just deeply interested in the whole sort of like pre-Islamic Persia, basically. I went through a whole phase. So I read Anabasis as part of that. It's actually one of those Penguin books, right? There is a copy of Xenophon. And so the books on my shelf are just the ones that will fit. Those shelves are slightly like a quarter inch too short for a standard hardcover. Right? We goofed when we built them. So I have to put trade paperbacks that are the right height. So the Penguin books all qualify. But I really hope you like the Tony Harrison Orsay. It's so good. It's so good. This is the best English version. In my semi-amateur opinion, it's so good. Let's see. If Hadrian was given a lightsaber, would he consider it an upgrade or a downgrade? It is a downgrade. The lightsaber is absolutely a worse weapon. It is not weighted like a sword, so that your odds of hurting yourself with it are substantially higher, and it puts off heat. No, thank you. I would not want to hold a lightsaber. So dangerous. So dangerous. Highlander sword still very dangerous, but marginally less dangerous. Somewhere between the sword and a lightsaber. Is there a book adaptation I would personally like to see, like another person's book? I would love to see Book of the New Sun done by like Mamoru Oshii as like an anime. I think that would be amazing. As far as my own, like I think I would also like to see Mamoru Oshii do Sun Eater. But no, I do think like if Sun Eater were adapted in some way, I think I would like animation, because animation is a smaller audience, but it's like a deeper, like more focused audience. And I would much rather have like committed fans than like casuals, right? And so I don't care if there are fewer of them. I want people to like really care about it, and like animation fans, anime fans, right? Care about whatever the thing is, generally speaking, more than the casual Netflix viewer. My instinct is that is better. I would rather go deeper than wider, if that makes sense. Let's see. Stanley, another great question. You've been on a roll, man. How did my book take off so far after its initial publication? So that's actually like more normal than not. So if you're talking specifically about the Empire of Silence hardcover, that's sort of a special case. But in terms of, so since November, my sales have more than tripled. Let's say, without sort of being too specific. Like I'm a Southerner, talking about figures is gauche. But things have been going very well, let's say. And that's a consequence primarily of BookTube. That's down to Mike's book reviews, and Daniel Green and Patrick Leo and all the rest, right? And so something will happen, years in, basically, and sales will pick up, or they won't, right? And so this was the thing for me. It could have been another thing. Often adaptations happening can be a trigger for things to pick up. Series getting finished is a really big trigger, especially now. Mentioned Name of the Wind earlier, right? The fact that there are two very high-profile fantasy series that have been unfinished for more than a decade has really damaged reader trust. And this is not meant to be a dig at Mr. Martin or Mr. Rothfuss, neither of whom I know. I've met Mr. Martin once. I've never met Pat Rothfuss. Like I don't know what they're dealing with or what's slowing them down. I don't understand, but this isn't an attack. But the basic problem is that like readers don't trust writers the way that they used to, and readers also have the luxury of being way more particular about what they read, because there's more to choose from. It's not like oh, I have to wait for the next Wheel of Time or whatever. This is like, what else is there? The answer is a trillion other things. And so readers can always like move on, and this means that there is a lot of opportunity for things to catch on later, but it also means that things getting finished is often the place where there are people who've been watching for, in my case, years, 6-7 years, who are like waiting for it to be done, and then they'll read it. Like I know Moid over at Media Death Cult is not reading the books till they're finished, because that's how he does his channel, right? And he's representative of a type of reader, right? And I would be shocked if there wasn't a giant bump when book 7 comes out on all the books, right? So something will happen, to push things. As far as the hardcover is concerned, the reason that did so well so quickly is because, like, I have a sort of core nuclear audience. About 5,000 subscribers here on YouTube, and if every one of you bought a book day one, that's almost enough to put me on the New York Times list. It doesn't take a lot of books. It takes between 5 and 10,000 to get you on the New York Times bestsellers list in 1 week. You have to sell those in 1 week. And one of the things that happens is that, like, publishing success is not normally distributed, right? It's not a bell curve, it's Pareto distributed. And so if you start to succeed in publishing, it becomes easier to succeed in other things. It's true of record sales, right? It's like true of like any sort of performance related activity. The more like notoriety you gain, the easier it is to get further notoriety because you already have some, right? And so, like, the ball is rolling now, and as long as I don't ruin it by ruining book 7, or shooting somebody or something, right? I don't know. Hopefully the hope is this will continue. And so the point is that nuclear audience was like ready and really, really wanted those hardcovers and had been begging for years. And I was trying. Empire of Silence went on a print hardcover in 2019, and basically since then I've been begging for them to bring it back. And I was no question drove me up the wall more than, like, why can't I buy the hardcovers, bro? Why are they $300? Why do you hate money? Why do you hate me personally? Because, like, obviously, like, most of those questions are silly, and like there's nothing I could do, right? It wasn't in my in my power, and I would send messages onto the publisher like, please, can we do something? I get like 6 of these a week, right? And that's enough to justify, but it took a long time to convince them to do something because it just isn't how things were done. And they took a risk, God love them, and it sort of worked for everybody. Like, publisher's delighted, I'm delighted, everybody's doing great. So glad they listened. Anyway, Joe says, how is the new cover for Lesser Devil coming along? It is not yet. John Ballaran, who did Dregs and who did the new Queen of Mid-Ashes cover, is currently doing the interiors for the Howling Dark Diamond edition. He took over for Taryn Fiddler, and so he's going to do those first. And so if we're going to see, we should see the Lesser Devil by the end of the year. It'll be later this year, like one of the Embers. We'll see it, last 4 months of the year, I'd imagine, because we got to finish the interiors for the Diamond Edition first. But it'll come along for sure. B Money, how do I decide what to keep historically accurate, what to change due to time, such as quotes from Dante versus Pandora's Cat? So with quotes, that's easier, right? Because, like, it's easier for the text to survive in some way. And when quotes are changed, and I do mess with them occasionally, I can blame the retranslation of text sometimes, but my sense is that, like, it's easier for a literary artifact to not get changed, because it's there as itself, but as far as, like, the other things, they occur to me, and I think they're fun usually, and I talk a lot about being, like, a really, like, sort of planning writer, outlines. I was doing that earlier. But, like, you should almost always, I think, listen to, it's not quite your conscience, right? But, like, that part of your mind that's like, here's like a fun idea. You should use that, right? Like, the whole Sid Arthur thing was a throwaway line in book 1. And, like, now it's not like a core part of the world building, but it's like, if the world building were the solar system, it's like maybe in the asteroid belt, right? It's not Earth, it's not Mercury, right? But it's not Pluto either. And so I sort of just trust that silly voice. It's like, maybe we should do the cat thing, right? And just sort of go for it. Let's see. Has the reprint done well enough to get the sequels reprinted? I have not gotten any definitive answer on that yet, but I am pretty optimistic. Pretty optimistic, let's just say. Do I like dogs? I do like dogs. I am also allergic to dogs, which is terrible. So I do not have one. I'm also allergic to cats, but I like cats substantially less because they like put their butts on things in my house, and I don't like them. They're usually not very friendly. But I had both growing up, and I liked my cat growing up because that was my cat. But now I've been when I went to college, I was like away from animals so much my allergies got so much worse, and now I just can't. Like I go to someone's house and they have a dog, I can't sit on their furniture. It's not fun. But I do like dogs. Um, Callan, favorite Souls game playing Liza P. It is 100% the best Souls like I've ever played. I've not played any of the Souls likes. They almost got me on the new Lords of the Fallen game because they played Iron Maiden in the trailer, and I'm like, are these my people? But I ended up not playing it because my ability to play video games is pretty limited these days, and so I just don't get to play. Like if it's not like I'm making time to play Shadow of the Erd Tree, I don't know that I'll be making time to like play like the Tree game or Lords of the Fallen or something like that. But as far as like the core ones, my favorite is Bloodborne. Bloodborne is amazing. I have a deep affection for Dark Souls One, and I like Elden Ring a lot. I think narratively, I think Elden Ring is the best of the bunch. Like in terms of the aggregate world building, I think it's a lot more nuanced and interesting than the world building in the original Souls games is. And partly that's just like time. I think Demon Souls is fascinating too from like a world building perspective. I like it a lot. Dark Souls 3 is my least favorite though. Dark Souls 3 is a little bit too wormed over for me. Um, I am a weird Dark Souls 2 stan. I like Dark Souls 2. I like all of them. I haven't played Sekiro though. It came out at a weird time. I wasn't playing games, and I haven't really like been back. So, um, do I have a favorite book that was signed to you from another author? Thanks for signing from Quail Ridge. Oh, you're welcome. Happy to do that. As far as signatures, so my favorite that I have the Folio first edition set of Book of the New Sun that Gene Wolfe signed like right before he died. And I did not, I like never got to meet Gene Wolfe, but he's my favorite writer. He's not Tolkien, right? And so having that at all is super cool. I as a kid. I got a copy of Ender's Game signed by Orson Scott Card, and I was telling him I wanted to be a writer, and he signed it to Christopher, a fellow storyteller, which I thought was really cool. And I think those are like the two probably. I have a signed Ian Banks book that I bought. I didn't meet Ian Banks before he passed. And I have a signed copy of Hyperion as well. Haven't met Dan Simmons, but I really it's the omnibus hardcover, the like purple one. It's kind of a weird looking edition. I like it a lot. But the Gene Wolfe ones and the Scott Card one are those are my favorites. Am I gonna write a novella about the poor artist who's only brought it a few? I might write a short story. I've thought about it. Everyone's been talking about poor Vianello recently, and I think that'd be interesting. How do I think Hadrian would like the work of Thomas Aquinas? I think he would find the Aristotelian stuff very agreeable. Hadrian is not a Christian, and so that might be a bit of a stumbling block for him. But I think I think he would not. I don't think he would completely disagree with it. So, would I do some collab with Mark Aramini? I haven't talked to Mark in a couple years now. I think it's been a minute. Also, where are his? But I would love to. Mark knows. The thing about doing a thing with Mark is that Mark knows so much more about Gene Wolfe's work than I do that I would look very stupid doing that video. He really, man, Mark is a genius. I As for where his books are, I thought they were on Amazon. I don't know where you can get them then. I will see if I can get an answer. Um, Maybe something. I know he's published by like a small press. I forget who. And so maybe something happened on the back end there. But I seem to remember them being on Amazon at some point. So I don't know. When is there going to be Urtani arts? They're the hardest thing for me to visualize. Man, me too. There will be some Urtani in the Broken Binding Demon in White, which is going to be out this year. Um, it, so yeah, so yeah. But you'll see them soon. Yeah, this is really hard for me too because they're not really exactly birds. So we'll see. But we'll take a crack at them when we get there with Demon in White and the Diamond Edition as well. We'll give John and James a shot as well. And when the Endorito versions come along, I'm sure Kieran will take a stab. And none of them have to be perfect. So if I had to choose between doing only books that come after or before the end of Sun Eater, what would I choose? After. That's easy. There's like way more time after than before. So on baptism question comes down to original sin. C.S. Lewis wrote a sci-fi trilogy about it. He sure did. Which I have not read, actually. I'm like familiar with like what it's about in detail, but I have never read the space trilogy. Right, Reed says there's 88 people here. Get more likes on the stream. Yeah, please do like the video. Man, I really should like start giving away books like every monthly update video though, because the last one the engagement was amazing. So thank you to everybody who participated. I do have books to give away. I should maybe just do that. Corey remembered his question from last month. I'm in for it here in a second. Max Garfield says, finished Empire of Silence, Howling Dark last month, and Universal short stories up to Demon in White. Novels are not that available in my country, but look forward to continuing the series. I am sorry about the availability issue. Which country is it? I could see see what the reason might be. I do know that it can be tricky sometimes with the overseas stuff, especially when we're trying to get the American editions. Those technically are only available as like imports outside of North America because of the way the contracts work. So it could be something like that. So Corey, this is an interesting question because this is going to be a do as I say, not as I do answer, I think. In light of my lukewarm takes on hard magic systems, which I don't like hard magic, how do I advise adding wonder magic to magic in a book? How do I approach the out there supernatural elements in my stuff? So if I had to do this again, I think what I would do is maybe not have Hadrian be the point of view character and maybe have like Basander be the narrator or something, because I have a sense that like what you should do is not right from the point of view of the empowered person, maybe ever, because I think the difficulty in writing from inside the head of somebody who understands secret things, right, magic, whatever, is that they then like tell you about it, and the more you tell people about stuff like that, the less wonderful it is, right? The numinous, right, and the horrible are kind of the same. When you talk about horror movies and horror stories, you like everybody's like, don't show the monster too much, don't show the monster too much, don't show the magic too much either, because if there's not a lot of magic, then what magic there is feels really tremendous, and that sense of restraint and proportion is what makes the magic really magical. Guy who does a really good job at this is George Martin. George Martin's magic always feels pretty eldritch and terrifying and strange in Song of Ice and Fire. I love that aspect of that world. So that would be my, like, if I was to give like a single piece of advice, is like maybe don't write the wizard point of view character. And I know you want to, Corey, and that's fine, but like I think the easiest thing you can do to maintain that sense of wonder is to distance the narrator from the magic itself. You can still do that and have the character be an adept in some way, right? By having there be stuff that even he doesn't understand, she doesn't understand, right? If you're a wizard, you might not understand a god, right? Or something. And so there are levels of abstraction you can still play with, but I think the right thing to do is to remove the narrator from understanding to a certain degree. You need to understand enough that like things make sense, but the character needn't, I think, is maybe the best advice I could give. What is the difference in my mind between dark novels and nihilistic novels? How do you walk that line? What are some good and bad examples of authors doing this? I'm not gonna give examples because I don't. I try really hard not to talk negatively about like other writers, unless it's funny. But setting that aside, as far as like what the difference is, tone, right? And like the point of what you're trying to communicate is there. We talk a lot about world building, we talk about character, we talk about plot, but like books have themes and they have points, right? And if your point is everything is dire and miserable and terrible and people are actually the worst, right? Then your book is probably nihilistic, right? Like if you're a nihilist writing the book, right? Then the book is probably nihilistic. But if you're not a nihilist, then you can write something that's really dark, right? And still come out and even darker than like the nihilistic stuff. Because the thing about nihilism is if nothing means anything, then neither does your suffering mean anything. And so a nihilist will always actually fail to be darker than somebody who believes in something, because the nihilist doesn't believe in anything. So your suffering doesn't matter. And so like, why do we care? You don't care. Obviously, your book's telling me that you don't care. This is why like H.P. Lovecraft isn't scary to me. H.P. Lovecraft's like, ooh, the universe is frightening and uncaring. And I'm like, okay, all right, so I can do whatever I want, right? We all can just do whatever we want if nothing matters. But what's far scarier is that like something matters, right? And like maybe like you are suffering like for a reason, your characters are suffering for a reason. And that means that your story suddenly has stakes, right? And so you can write something that's far darker and more horrible, I think, than a nihilistic story, right? While not being nihilistic, because you haven't, because that's just not who you are as a writer. So I think fundamentally it comes down to a characterological difference between the writers in question, an attitudinal difference. Thoughts on Hyperion? There are certainly nods to it inside here. I like to joke that it is from Dan Simmons nodding to things that I learned that you can nod to things as a writer. So the fact that Sundier nods to things is like a meta nod to Hyperion in and of itself. I love Hyperion. I think it's a work of genius. I love the first two books. Endymion and Rise, I have like more mixed feelings about. But there's still some cool stuff in there. I love like the river voyage and all that stuff. Super cool. The like fight at the Dalai Lama's place with the Shrike, super awesome. In the Endymion books, but the first two are like just absolute works of genius. People are sort of split on Fall of Hyperion. Like they shouldn't be. Fall of Hyperion is awesome. But like, I read Hyperion and he uses the internet works the same way it does in Neuromancer, right? They use the same words for things. And I was like, oh shoot, you can do that? That's just like allowed. So I learned how to be the kind of writer I am, I think, in a lot of ways from reading Hyperion. I think that stylistically, like on a writerly craft level, I think this maybe been more influential on me than like even Dune was. But it's like right up there. It's probably Dune's my number 2 after New Sun. Hyperion's probably number 3. I love those books. Because I like Ilium better and I like Hyperion. So Hyperion's in the running, but Ilium and Olympus are super bizarre world building, super cool. And I'm like a big classics weeb, right? So if you put Odysseus in space, like I'm gonna show up. So but yeah, no, I love Dan Simmons. I think he's great. Given how big Sundier is gone, do you have plans to go big in the standalones you plan on writing, or will I go smaller and save bigger stuff for the sequel? When you say big, do you mean like in terms of like length of the novel, like scope of the novel? Like I expect the standalones will be like 200,000. I think they'll be a little bit shorter. They'll be like 150, 200,000 words long. As far as like what happens in them, I expect some of that'll be pretty big. And like knowing me, like it's possible some of those standalones will just turn into trilogies or something because I can't help myself. But we'll see. The sequel, like let's not get too bent out of shape, by the way, about the sequel series. I I do intend to write another series in this universe. I do not intend to write that anytime soon. So like, let's not get too excited. Like I'd probably take like a decade to do other things first. So we'll get there eventually. Um, yeah, Paul, this is a really good question about the events of Disquiet Gods. It's a big spoiler question on the more recent book. So I'm not gonna do it right now if that's okay. But the answer is yes. There's a pretty good reason. Um, but let's see. Being a fellow DAW author, do I ever get to meet Patrick Rothfuss? No, I never have. I have met Ted Williams though. Ted Williams was a delight. He was we were at like a big DAW dinner. This was in like 2018, I think. It was like right after I started, and Rothfuss wasn't there. So this is not like me saying he didn't do this, but Tad Williams went around and introduced himself to all the new writers, like all the like little writers like me, and that was really cool. Some of the other bigger names did not do that, and that meant a lot to me. I thought that was a really classy thing to do. So I guess I'm saying I want to be like Tad Williams when I grow up. That was he was really nice. You know, I was like way down at the foot of the table with, you know, the other new kids, and he was sitting up with Bessie Walheim at the cool kids end of the table. When in the timeline will the Sandra Lynn novella take place? So I want to write one, but I don't know what it is yet. I just like Bassander deserves to have a novella at some point, unless you're referring to the story, the novelette that's in the Diamond Edition that takes place between Empire of Silence and Hell and Dark. And another novella, Anderida edition incoming. Yeah, we're probably going to do more and other stories books from Anderida eventually. How many of the fans actually read the short stories? I'd say probably fewer than 10%. It's not very many. This is one of the reasons why when people say like, why haven't you done one thing or another? It's the short stories ultimately are to reward like the sort of folks who are like right here, right? You know, like you guys are like the core. I've talked about like my readers in terms of concentric circles. Like the short stories are things you do for like the inner circle, right? Which is like you guys, right? And so like I don't want to say like they're simultaneously like more important and less important. Trying to figure out how to like communicate this, because almost nobody reads them, right? But the people who do like are very important and like deserve more of them. So like there's this weird tension in terms of like my priorities and how I adjust my time. So like right now I've taken like 2 weeks off, maybe 3 weeks now off writing book 7 because I have like so many like other things I need to do, including like get a bunch of the short story stuff sorted out for special editions and things like that. So I'm trying to knock off. I have like a whole like 40 line item list here up on my wall of things I need to do, and like most of them are deal with short story crap for Tales 4, the omnibus special editions, and it's getting to the point where that stuff is cluttering up my head so much that like it's really getting in the way of my ability to work on book 7. So they have to go before I can know peace, I suppose. But it is a vanishingly small proportion. When I buy a book on sale, does it cost the author money? No. Are they paid a percentage on book, or is it dependent on the contract? It does vary by contract, but usually what happens is the author is paid a percentage of whatever the market price is. And so when something is discounted, the author still gets paid everything. The publisher still gets paid everything. It's the retailer who's taking the hit. So this is why Amazon is able to undercut basically any other retailer. Amazon, when they take, say, for example, a $30 hardcover like Disquiet Gods, and they sell it for $18, they're probably making $3 because what usually happens is about 50% goes to the retailer of what the market price is, right? And then the other 50% gets split between the publisher and the author, right? And depending on the type of book it is, whether it's paperback, hardcover, audio, whatever, and who the author is, because the more famous you are, the more you get, right? The author might get like, say, 10% is pretty standard on like a hardcover. So it's 10%, then 40 to the publisher, 50 to the retailer, right? Now, if the retailer decides, hey, I'm going to discount it basically to 2/3 of its cost, right? Then the retailer is making almost nothing. So sometimes with those Amazon sales, Amazon is losing money to sell you a book more cheaply than you could buy it anywhere else, so that they turn you into an Amazon um, partisan, so that you go to Amazon to buy your books because you can get better deals than you can anywhere else. And Amazon is willing to lose money to change your buying habits so that they can hurt Barnes and Noble and everybody else, right? So I remember there was a person who wanted to buy a signed book from me. I think this was a Reddit message. This was years ago. Who was like, "Hey, will you?" And I was, "Will you sell the book to me?" I was like, "Sure." Empire of Silence hardcover was new. It was like $26. Why don't we say with media mail, give me, $32. That should cover shipping. If you're anywhere in the US, will be good, right? I said, "Well, I can get it for $15 on Amazon right now. Can you match that?" And I was like, "No, like I can't actually." Um, so when Amazon or whoever does that discount, they're diminishing their own profits, not hurting me or the publisher because they can't do that. Um, so anyway, the Sun Eater world is so expansive now. How do I keep track of it? I imagine the struggle to write in continuity as it very cool. Uh, but a struggle to write in continuity as it is to read between releases. Um, like it's my job, right? So like like you think about your job, kind of like probably more than you should, right? Um, I think about it all the time and sort of try to keep these things um sort of in mind. So a lot of it's like active memory, to be perfectly honest. Like I just know where things are, but I have files, I have timelines, I have you saw a cleaned up version of the timeline in Disquiet Gods. um but you know but I have files, I have stuff on like sales and language, I check stuff, and I don't always do it I don't always do it perfectly. I make mistakes sometimes. And in which case I have Casey. I don't know if Casey's still here. Casey will set me right. So yeah. Will I do a book about some sci-fi firefighters in Sun Eater if I get enough likes? Never say never, but I have to like come up with an idea. So who knows? Um, let's see. Man, I am like super behind on the chat, aren't I? I just got Write and Reads talking about 1,000 words a day. That was like an hour ago. Man. Um, but we'll keep going. We usually go like 2 hours, so never fear. I will do my best. Bangus Khan says, after I read Disquiet Gods, I saw chatter from Jenna that I agonized over writing chapter 40. Big time. I definitely see why. I want to be tough. Curious to hear your thoughts on why that was, because it was tough, man. Like it's like very important for like the whole series. It's very important to me as a person. It's very important um to like not alienate readers, right? It's like very big, very complicated. I spent about 2-3 months writing that chapter, which is as long as the entirety of Dregs of Empire. It was I think I wrote it like 7 or 8 times. It was extremely painful. Extremely painful. But it was everything. It was ideas, it was word choice, it was um like how much of stuff do I explain, how much of that part of the universe do I like get into. It was huge. It was huge. Will Sun Eater ever get an expansive illustrated lore book? Would love to get into deep dive on certain lore in the universe. I mean, so maybe, right? There's a huge gap between me and like Brandon Sanderson and like me and George Martin, right? And lore books, we're talking like Fire and Blood, Silmarillion, that sort of thing, right? Um, like the short stories are something that maybe only like 10% of your readers are really going to get into. Now, if it's illustrated, that number goes up, right? As people like picture books. And But it's still not going to go like all the way up. Um, and so it's tricky if your audience is a lot smaller than say Game of Thrones' audience to make one of those a winning financial proposition. Now, with things like Kickstarter, the margins are much better for like me as a writer. So if I were to do something like that, it would um, probably be done something. I would probably do Kickstarter for something like that if I were to do it relatively soon. But like who knows, um, like what the next few years will bring. So um, So who knows? Max Garfield says loves all the references to Dante, Kubla Khan, Christopher Marlowe, Wastelands, Tir Khan, etc. I'm really glad that you caught Melinda Panna though. That's probably the most obscure one there. It's so interesting that we have this like, um, yeah. It's so interesting that it exists at all. The whole sort of Greco Hindu moment in time is just so cool. If I were to do that, it's like one of the my like extended wish lists is to like do a fantasy like about that period in history. It's just so interesting. Callan says, seeing Jenna champion you on the books on Reddit is great. Yeah, she's been having fun. Um, I just read Shards of Honor by Bujold, and seeing Influence on Sunny find a spot. Um, it book felt like if EOS started from Valka's POV, meeting a middle-aged Hadrian with his bad rep. That's an interesting comparison. I never thought about Errol and Cordelia's Hadrian and Valka proxies, but I can see it. Best Star Wars movie not in the original trilogy, Revenge of the Sith. And why? Because it's awesome. No, Revenge of the Sith is the best of the prequels in terms of its sort of aims and its ambitions, like artistically, right? It's trying to tell the biggest story, but it also does the best job telling the story. It still has like the same problems. There's too much green screen. The acting is really inconsistent. But it like really strongly leans on Ian McDermott in a way that the other two don't, and he's obviously amazing, right? John Williams is at the top of his game in the prequels. Period. It's George's vision, so it's like it's new and interesting in the way that like think about the prequel movies is they're like the most expensive auteur films like ever made, right? This is also why I like David Lynch's Dune movie, right? It's a deeply expensive giant auteur film, and like we never give directors that much money to do whatever they want, right? We give it to George Lucas, and the Broccoli's gave it to David Lynch like that one time in the '80s, right? To like, and then they ruined it for him, right? Like David Lynch is still haunted by that movie. But in the case of the prequels, like that's all George, right? And like that's a mixed bag because like George isn't Stanley Kubrick, right? He's a great filmmaker, but he has limitations. Like he can't write dialogue like to save his life, right? But it is still a product of like his singular vision in a way that like the Disney films can never be. The Disney films are like corporate, focus tested, warmed over nonsense. There's like no spirit in them at all. And there is in the prequels, and like they like widen the universe in weird ways. Like name a big idea like pod racing, or like the structure of the Jedi Order, or the Rule of Two, or anything that the sequels have contributed. There isn't one. And there isn't one because there's like no spirit in those movies at all. Um, uh, Rogue One's like pretty good, but Rogue One's pretty good because it's like in service to the original film, right? And it's like deeply slavishly in service to the original film. And like that kind of like works. But it doesn't really introduce any like seriously new ideas. It like elaborates ideas that are already there and goes back to old ideas that didn't get used, like the wills. But yeah, Revenge of the Sith all day. It's so good, and the novelization is. I've said this 100 times. It's actually amazing. Like it is a really like objectively great book, great science fiction book, um, and like I highly recommend it to basically anybody. Like it's a Matthew Stover's style in that book, like on a writerly level, is just so interesting and dynamic and great. I absolutely love the Revenge of the Sith novelization. Um, Read Michael Moorcock or draw 25 cards. Draw 25 cards. I still have not forgiven Michael Moorcock for not liking Tolkien. Um, let's see. Uh, Casey, I am really tired of doing the Dune rant, so I'm trying to shorten it as much as humanly possible. I eventually am gonna just have to say I don't even talk about Dune anymore. But it like feels rude just to be like, time to move on. Am I a fan of Legend of the Galactic Heroes? No, but I want to be. I have not seen it yet, but I really keep meaning to go back and watch it. It's just really long, so I haven't committed to starting it. Trey says, shout out to your wife for making a Reddit account and being active on the sub. She's added so much great context and behind the scenes info. I hope she's not saying too much about my secrets. But yeah, no, she's the best. Jenna, if you're watching, I love you very much. Term coin for Petrick for the climax of my novels is Ruocchio. Thoughts? I heard someone say Rock Slide earlier. That was I think I like that one better. But Volcano is not bad. I'll take either one. Look, Zin, you're out here telling me now that you don't like Howl's Moving Castle. All right, Christian Bale pilots the Batman voice before Batman in that movie. All right, but at least you're correct. Calcifer is the best part. If you've got Billy Crystal in your movie, it's gonna be great. I like Howl's Moving Castle. It's not my favorite Ghibli film by any means. It's probably Spirited Away, maybe Princess Mononoke. Depends on the day of the week, but not liking it, man, it hurt my feelings. What are modern fantasy fans missing out on by sleeping on the Conan books they won't get out of other fantasy stories? Sparse isn't the right word. Economic sounds like an insult. Economic prose. The thing about the Conan stories is that in like 10,000 words, Robert E. Howard does what most modern writers, probably myself included, can't do in 300,000. The Conan stories are all huge, even when they're really short. And so you can read and have the experience of reading what feels like, in terms of scope of ideas and time and space and character, an entire book in like 30 pages. They've aged, I think, extremely well. Like, some of the social attitudes in the books are like not 2024, but it's the Hyborian age. It's not 2024. Like, why would you want it to be, right? So that's fine. But they have this like this sort of depth of impact that you like don't see in most modern novels in like a very short space. And so the tendency is to sort of like dismiss them as like big dumb stupid books for boys by a big dumb stupid boy, right? And people have this like conception of Conan as like a dumb brute, right? And it's immediately complicated if you read Phoenix on the Sword by Conan's like the first thing Conan ever does, right, is lament that he must kill a poet, because in doing so he will be destroying someone who's brought so much beauty into the world. This is not, right, the actions of a big dumb brute. He is a barbarian, but he is not stupid. He is not a brute, right? Or not only a brute, right? He's far more complicated than people generally give him credit for. All Howard's characters are. Maybe Cull less so. Cull's sort of a beta version of Conan in a lot of ways. But you get these big stories in a really small amount of space, and you kind of like don't miss the fact that it's not a 100,000 word adventure. It still like feels like it's all there, and that's just an artifact of the writing being very different. And the writing, Howard's writing stylistically is the closest maybe of any major fantasy writer to Tolkien in terms of the actual style. Now he's not Tolkien, but in terms of sort of the way that he writes, the way the sentences are constructed, nothing reminds me of Lord of the Rings more than Howard's prose does. Now the worlds are very different. The value structures are like very different, right? Howard is not he's not Catholic, right? He's got some like weird like 1920s kind of like just like sort of weird like eugenic progressive beliefs, right? So he's like a very different worldview, right? There's a lot of stuff about like reincarnation and stuff throughout all of his work that's taken pretty seriously. Some weird ideas in there. But it's fantasy, right? So like so when I say he's like Tolkien, I don't mean like spiritually, ethically at his core, but aesthetically. If you like Lord of the Rings, there's a lot of stuff there of like serious value. Tower of the Elephant is an absolute masterpiece. It's so good. It's so good. I usually tell people to start there just because it's awesome. And you can read them really in any order. It's fine. How do I write books so fast? It feels like I'm writing them very, very slow. Honestly, like I said, I haven't written book 7 in like 3 weeks, and I'm starting to feel sick about it. But I have like so much other stuff I need to do, and if I can get it out of the way, then I'm like free for 6, 7, 8 months. Um, uh, this is gonna sound like really, this is gonna sound like really trite, maybe, but like writing is my job. And so I do my job every day. And I get up in the morning. I get up really early. I get up at like 5 o'clock, and I write until my daughter wakes up. And then I like take a break. When she goes back to sleep, I write more. And if I don't do anything else in that day, I'll write. Like it doesn't matter. Like I will until I get to the point where I'm like, oh crap, I haven't cleaned the house in like a week. I need to do something, right? Um, and then I'll play catch up, right? But like the writing is the most important thing to do. It's the top item on my to-do list every single day. And I won't, if I don't finish writing, then like I don't get to play Elden Ring, right? I don't get to do that. I don't get to do whatever else. Like I have to write. And it's going to get easier here in the near future. I'm going to have more time again to be able to get stuff done, which will be nice. Some things changing at home because I've been only able to work like 3-hour days for like the past 3 months or so, as my daughter has taken fewer and fewer naps. Um, but but yeah, no, it's my job and I do it every day, and that's not very helpful if you have like another job, right? Like it's not your job and you have a life, or you're a student or whatever. And my advice to people who like want to be professional writers is that it is the same as if you want to be if you want to lose 40 pounds, or if you want to like learn to play the guitar, you like have to do it, right? And it's not one of those things like there is no muse, right? Newsflash, Greek gods not real. There is, it's one of those things, right? Said Bit from Dune, right? Like, like you write, right? No matter the mood, right? Mood's a thing for cattle. And you just have to do it. And sometimes you can. It's okay to like miss days, and it's okay to, give yourself a break, but it's not gonna happen if you like don't do it. Which sounds very silly, right? But like, the thing is that like I would rather write books than do basically anything else, right? I would rather write books than play video games. I would rather write books than go outside. I would rather write books than read them. I would rather, I would rather write books than watch movies, or almost anything. Um, the exception being spending time with like my friends and my family. That's like the only thing. And so it's easy for me because like, wow, that's like way more fun than whatever else I'd be doing. And so like maybe that's the secret. But like I genuinely like to be in this room by myself for like 4 hours at a time, making up nonsense. Like that is, man, that's a good day for me. And now it gets to be basically every day, which, thank you to all of you. But that's really the thing. So if you like have a job, right? And let's say it's like a regular 9 to 5. I remember I was reading Ben Franklin, of all people. And so you should probably listen to him because he's like Ben Franklin, right? Talking about how like what you should do if you have a job and you have something else that's like really important to you is like get up before the job and like do that, right? So that your day isn't about your work. And I think this is where like a lot of maybe modern people get so miserable, is they like wake up just barely in time to go do their job, and they go do their job and they come home, and maybe they like they make dinner, and maybe they go to the gym, or they have like a thing, and then they like watch TV and go to sleep. But like maybe you're staying up too late, right? And like maybe there's something pernicious about like all the doom scrolling on your phone that's like draining your ability to do something else with your time. So like the like early morning was the thing for me when I had to, because I wrote the first 3 books with a full-time job, right? I would get up super early, like I still do, and I would work until I had to leave, which was like, it would give me like 3 hours, 2 hours, depending on when I got up. And so I was able to get like 1,000, 1,500 words done in those days before I left for the office. And so that like that just made work like a thing I did that day instead of the thing that set the tone for my day. And I think that was a big change. Now, if that's, your schedule doesn't make something like that possible, like, man, I totally get it. Life is hard, but like that was what was That was a thing for me. So um, brr. Stanley, this is a great question, actually. Why do authors sell an 800-page book for 25 instead of two for 15 or 20? Or two for 25 for that matter, actually, because people would still buy them. It does not make any sense. You're quite right. These giant books that I'm writing are stupid, and I should not write them. Um, I uh, would not be writing books this long anymore, except for the fact that the first six were really long, and I want to stop doing it. It takes me like 300 days to finish a task. In this case, writing the book, and that is like, man, that's a long time to do one thing. I get to the point around like day like 170 where I'm like, oh, this will never be over. It's like the longest marathon ever, and you get really demoralized. It happens every time. I get into this like giant slog around like month like 5 of working on these things, and I just want to explode. Yeah, no, and it's also bad, like you say, financially, and it's even worse than that because bookstores worry about shelf space by the inch, and so if your book is this big, they're going to order one, and they might order zero. Where if your book was this big and you're a new author, they might risk buying like 3 copies, which means you could reach like 3 times as many customers with a shorter book than a longer one. This is another thing that like worked against me with a series starting out. This is why you don't see a lot of long series of long books, is they are financially infeasible, and people write them, publish them because people do buy them. If you can find the audience, people like them for the product that they are, which is like because you're getting a really good deal, right? If you buy a 800, the customer's getting a really good deal. If you buy an 800-page book for $25-$30, that's like hours of entertainment. It's way better return on investment than like a movie ticket, right? And so people like that. People like the kind of space that you get with a character. The other problem, though, of course, is that if you are writing, if Sunnier were to be composed of 100,000 word books, there'd be like 20 of them. And so the longer the series gets, then you have like a different problem too, where you have a dropout rate. And people will hold out through 7 books in a way that they won't for 20. And so the decline book to book will continue over time. So you don't want the series to be too long either, right? People, you see a lot of like aspiring fantasy writers who like want to write like Wheel of Time, but there's literally one Wheel of Time. Like it is not the pattern of conduct, right? Like Wheel of Time is not what you should aspire to be writing as a fantasy writer. There's literally only one of them, like, and it's not going to be replicated. Like even something like Sanderson's Cosmere is structurally quite different, right? It's not one like 20 book series that's that big, right? So it's tough, but you're right. It's like actually stupid to write books that are this long. It would be much more in my interest financially to write shorter books. And after the series, I intend to do that. So, yeah, I did not know this when I started, and it would be bad of me to suddenly start turning in Sun Eater books that are a third as long, and expect people to be happy with them. So I'm finishing the series. I'm keeping you all in a style to which you've been accustomed, to borrow the phrase from Divorce Court, but then after this, things will change structurally. Let's see. Is Calcenterite a pun on call center? That's funny. First thought of it perhaps being derived from calce, as in chalcedon. It is related to the Greek for copper. What was his name? There was a tutor of Mark Antony's children by Cleopatra. Specifically, I think he tutored Alexander and Selene, Helios and Selene, and his nickname was Calcenterus, because of his like work ethic, if I recall correctly. But so it's a reference to that guy whose like actual name escapes me. But he was but he was the Tor Gibson to Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene. Um, how big will the volcano be in Shadows Upon Time? It's like the whole book, man. I've written about half a book, book 7, and it's just like idea. I'm very, very, very happy with book 7 so far. There are a couple things I need to edit and work on, but like that's normal. That's normal. I nominate Mel Gibson to make the Sun Eater movie TV series. Man, he's such a great director, though. Hank Star Ridge is amazing. I see Benjamin is up to his usual antics here. Do you construct villains, antagonists like in Batman the animated series, character trait representative the protagonist corrupted? No, I don't. No. In terms of making the villains, they usually are at some sort of ideological opposition to either Hadrian or the Empire or the Quiet in some way. And so their battle personally is also a battle of ideas. Can Octavia Corvo step on her romantic interests? I mean, anyone can step on their romantic interests, Benjamin. Whether or not you should, as a matter of decency and respect to another person, is a different matter. Part of the series, would I like to see animated? The whole thing, but like a specific sequence, I don't know. I don't know. The thing about doing like the illustrated editions, Diamond and Nardo, whoever, right? Is that like I'm really interested to get to the later books. Like even when I say that, I mean like even just like Howling Dark. I've been doing illustrations for Empire of Silence now for 3 different companies, and I'm like ready to move into like the deeper stuff, the weirder stuff. So that'll be exciting. That ever crossed my mind how expensive Sun Eater would be to adapt. So like here's the thing, I don't. This one of the reasons why I said like animation I think would be better, right? But like, you know, I say this to people all the time when they ask like when the movie's coming, right? Which is usually like my parents' friends, like when's the movie, right? Like the object of literature is not to become cinema, right? So if there's never an adaptation, I will be perfectly happy. I'll be perfectly happy. You know, I don't need one, right? I'm like very grouchy. I'm like very much like of Tolkien's mind on this issue. Like books are the coolest art form that exists. They let you get in touch with humanity and with human consciousness in a way that other media don't, right? You know, at scale and they're able to be more ambitious in terms of things like time. You know, cinema really like can't take as much time as a book can, right? Or cover as much time. Time jumps in movies are way more disturbing than they are in, especially within a movie, than they are in books. And so you're able to do a lot more. And literature is the best art form. And so in a certain sense, like any other right movie, any other medium would be to like lose something, I think. Um, and that's fine because like what you gain is like new eyeballs, right? And like that's great from a business perspective. But like I'd be perfectly happy if nothing ever happens. So I was like never thinking about what the cost of the series would be because I like don't care, right? Like I want the series to be awesome. I want the books to be the best books I can write, and if that makes them hard to adapt, that's a problem for a studio. And they might have to come up with some, um, you know, they have to come up with some solution. Um, you know, that's their problem. I'm ignoring you, Samuel. I saw your comment, and I'm not going to dignify it. In Sun Eater, which groups of people with African descent part of example Palatine, Jadian? There are people of African descent sort of basically in like most of the cultures. House Mataro, is of African descent, or at least Balian is. You know, Lord Luther is Chinese, but a lot of the Normans are. Like Bastien Durand, for example, is. And off the top of my head, Dr. Koyo, obviously, as far as characters are, but they're all they're out there, man. They're out there. There is not a missing ethnicity. Like everybody from Earth is out there somewhere. Yeah, so we've got some characters there. Just I hope you didn't miss them. Sunny, your anime Kickstarter. That would be pretty awesome. Book talk coming around as well. Excellent, excellent. Are there any contemporary sci-fi authors I haven't read or interested in reading? I've never read Peter Hamilton. One of these days, maybe. I have not read Adrian Tchaikovsky off the top of my head. Those are like the two that that I like to go and read. I am, I don't read a lot of like new stuff anymore. Because I've said this before, like the fact that like people would like not like the Dune references, right, never occurred to me. I just thought people would like understand like why I was doing it and like the point I was trying to make. And the fact that people like don't get it really like messed with me for a long time. Now I think it's like dumb, like that they don't get it. Like, but like early on I was like, oh shit, like did I make a mistake, right? And I don't think that I did. But like it really messed with me. And so I like don't feel in a lot of ways that I like should read new stuff, if that makes sense, because I like don't want to hear that critique ever again, because it bothered me a lot. But like that doesn't mean I won't do it. I read new books when I'm like asked to do blurbs and stuff. So but one day, will I take a stab at lit RPG? No, no, I won't. But Human No More. If Sun Eater ever gets adapted to be awesome, if the characters speak similarly to their languages instead of pure English or pure Japanese, but I guess it's too ideal. Well, unless we get Mel Gibson, right? So, do the Lothrians severely outnumber the Solons? It seems like they rely on large numbers of troops with relatively primitive weapons. They are able to maybe field more people, but overall aggregate population, no. The Empire takes better better care of its people individually than the Lothrians do. The Lothrians don't care about individual people. Hadrian's most recently seen life reminds me of the Eldar in Tolkien. Intentional? No, not intentional. Interesting thought though. If Sun Eater got a drawing adaptation, will it be manga or graphic novel? I mean, graphic novel is like more likely, right? Because I don't like it when people call something that's done in manga style manga, because manga is sort of culturally specific. Like that really ought to be reserved, I think, for Japanese creators, right? Like it's like their thing, right? And so I'm probably more likely to work with someone who like with an artist who speaks English, right? I don't speak Japanese nearly well enough to have a conversation even. I have like, like 2 years of high school Japanese, 10 plus years ago, 15 years ago. But so I'm more likely to work with somebody that I could maybe communicate with and not need a translator. But you never know. You never know. I certainly wouldn't be opposed to doing it. Lord knows. But it doesn't seem mechanically likely. So I'm going to skip that question if you don't mind. Yeah. Correct answer is Bloodborne. Correct, man. Yeah, I'm so behind on the chat, man. So behind on the chat. Does Hadrian like heavy metal rock music? Assuming it exists in some form. It exists in some form. What does he think about it? I don't know. Dalka certainly likes it. I know Sekiro's good. I just haven't gotten to it yet. I have never read Speaker for the Dead, Nassim. Once I realized what it was about, I backed off because it sounded like I was moving into the same space. How do I organize and write world building? Mostly I don't. So this is one of those questions I can't really helpfully answer, because I've been working on the setting like most of my life, and so I know it the way that you work on something you've been working on for like 20 years, right? Because I have been, and so it's like cheating for me, because I like have like a I have like all these years of practice at it, and so a lot of it honestly is just memory. As far as the stuff that isn't though, because like I can't remember dates to save my life, man. I like write down. I have like a timeline file. I've got a list of planets. The stuff that was in the backs of the books. That's basically like all I have, except for some language notes, and then my book outlines. And I really think about things in terms of like whatever the current project is. So the outline is really like that's the core document, right? And then once the book exists, the books are the core document. So I do a lot of like Control F, and so I'll remember, oh, like the word, like the word green was like near the part where like green's a bad example, but like if you remember, I said like, the green boat, right? Like there's maybe only like 2 or 3 instances of that phrase in the book. So I'll search for that and then I'll read until I find the thing I was looking for and remember what I said and try to be consistent. This is not a perfect method. This does result in things like the population of Thagora changing 3 times in the course of Queen of Mid-Ashes, and needing to get fixed, which we fixed. The new version is fixed that. The audiobook is not consistent, but the book is consistent now. But it mostly works. And that's what second editions are for. So yeah. As a writer, do I aspire to create many different worlds or try to combine everything into only one world? I saw an interview with Jonathan Mayberry a couple weeks ago where he was talking about Stephen King told him to like make all of your work connect in some way because people love that. And like if you do it in a way that like casual readers aren't going to notice or care about, it's fine. But your dedicated readers will eat that up, and I think that's really good advice. But like I have ideas that like wouldn't connect to Sun Eater in any way. So like, if I can connect something, I will. If I can't, I won't. And I think that's probably the best, if unhelpful, answer. Thoughts on Charles III's new portrait. I haven't taken a really good look at it. It reminded me of that Obama portrait with the trees, but like the red version. So I don't know. I'd have to really think about it. Given how I have pushed my own special editions, any chance I could browbeat Rob or Steve into doing a full solar cycle special edition? Now there is a thought. Should I bully and write a books into doing all of the all of the solar cycle books? That would be you've given me an idea. I'll keep it in my heart somewhere. Love the cosmological scales. I've introduced any based on scholarly work of Michael Heiser. I am not certain who that is, to be honest. So I'm afraid not. Will Zulu. I did really go there. In Kings of Death. Godspeed, sir. Let's see. I just want to say thank you for being involved with those peasants. I see Jenna's got you all calling yourselves peasants now. That's funny. She affectionately refers to my readers as our peasants, which I think is very funny. I picture the Ertani like Toucan Sam as painted by Frank Frazetta. That's my answer from now on. How did I go setting up my website? My wife did it. She does all the graphic design and stuff for me, and she used Squarespace to do that. So she is better at computer stuff than me. Basander POV of the entire series, please. Yeah, I wish I'd had that idea sooner, because like it's I really do like the off-center narrator where the narrator is not the main character of the story. That's definitely something I want to do in the future. So how does my personal faith or beliefs affect my writing? It's not that it's too personal to ask. I just I don't really know how to answer it like adequately, because think about like someone's convictions, whatever they may be, right? Like I'm Catholic, right? But if you were, you know, if you were Hindu or Muslim or whatever, right? Is that like that is like so deeply a part of like who you are that it is your writing, right? In a way that like people are more easily separated from their skin than they are from their beliefs in a lot of cases, right? Saint Bartholomew comes to mind. And so um, you know, I don't really know how to answer that question because um like in a certain sense, even when a character says something or believes something that I don't, the way that it's implemented is a product of like, you know, my own thinking, right? You know, even if it's something I don't agree with or feel, right? Because I like am the person who's trying to figure out how to get it on the page, right? It's like you know, in the same way that like really there's only one character in these books. It's all Hadrian and his relating to you these other people, which he might be wrong about and is frequently, right? By the same token, like everything there is me, even when it's not, right? So it's hard to say, right? Like because I, you know, am you know Christopher the writer, but Christopher the Catholic too, and like those guys are like those are the same person, right? And so it's hard for me to separate that meaningfully. Um, you know, I have that being said, I want the books to be for anyone. I've said this before, right? Like I've said this like 100 times. It's unused for anybody, and the fact that like I am one thing does not mean that the books like can't be for someone who isn't, right? I like ultimately like these are science fiction stories. They are science fiction stories written by me, right? But they are meant to be science fiction stories. They're not meant to be um, like evangelical texts or philosophical treatises. They're not meant to be arguments, right? Except to the extent that a narrative is ever an argument, right? But like none of it's real, right? Like the point of the book is for you to have fun reading it, ultimately. So, um, so did I pick a comment? Yes, I said I'd pick it a week later. I did pick, but don't worry. I think I'm gonna like start doing that on the monthly update videos because that did so well in terms of like engagement. I think what I probably will do is like say who wins in the next update. I can't remember the fellow's name was Cameron. He picked Cassandra, and I because he also just had a new daughter, so I had a soft spot for that answer. So obviously the selection of these winners is like completely biased. It's like entirely like my choice, right? There's you know so the system can be gamed. Is what I'm saying. But so he won. I believe his name was Cameron. Uh, yeah, but yeah. Let's see. With me signing new hardcovers at Quail Ridge Books, is there a time frame someone could go there to get other books signed as well? Would that be too much? Um, like to like physically come in and meet me to sign the books. I don't know about making appointments or something. I don't know when I'm going to be in to be physically signing the books they're going to be signing. I'm not doing like a thing there. I'm just going to go in and sign the books that they have. It's not like an event or anything because I live, let's say within half an hour of the bookstore. I live in Raleigh, so but I won't be doing like a thing. So um, boom, boom, boom. Currently working on Howling Dark. Sorry, looking for question marks. Banks Culture. Yeah, I love culture books. My favorite's Use of Weapons. Use of Weapons is super cool. Super experimental too. Structurally, it's awesome. Awesome book. Um, um, let's see. I want to say I haven't actually sat down and read a book start to finish, probably well over 5 years, but I couldn't put Empire of Silence down. Kel, thank you so much. That means so much. Um, Hrishi says, "Can I explain Sid Arthur in my universe in brief? It's kind of based on King Arthur, but since it's not my cultural background, I'm unable to understand." Okay, so it started out as a really silly pun. In sort of a like if you've read Brave New World, like the Year of Our Ford kind of way. It Sid Arthur, right? It's El Cid and Arthur, but it sounds like Siddhartha, and so the idea is that some planet somewhere in the empire of people who like don't have complete understanding of like the original historical documents, either King Arthur or the Buddha or anything, got confused. And so it's like a weird space religion that is a kind of syncretic faith that basically believes that King Arthur was like a bodhisattva, basically, and so confuses these things, and so they're just like a weird sort of confused colony religion that sort of caught on with soldiers in the empire, especially since it's about like this conflation of knightly virtues with like the Eightfold Path and like right action in like sort of a like martial sense and stuff like this, and it's sort of gotten out of control. It was not supposed to be a thing that any major characters sort of held to, but it the like mythological correspondences between certain things, right? The Buddha gains enlightenment from a tree. Arthur learns from Merlin, who is sealed in a tree, right? There are like ways to like imagine, like you could combine the mythological symbols from these stories. You could see how a culture confused about the source material would confuse them, right? And so it's just like a fun thing. In the same way, like I got the Pandora's cat story. It's probably the biggest example of the Pandora's cat thing happening in the books, as it's this like very at this point articulated like future religion that got made up. So yeah, so that's that. Sorry, I'm trying to find the next question. Are the novellas easier because I've worked through them beforehand in your head to write the main story? They're easier because they're shorter, and I can like escape from writing them faster. It takes me like between 4 and 8 weeks to write one of them usually, and so I can like get in and out of them more quickly and get the dopamine from finishing a task. And so the novellas are appealing to me for that reason more than anything else. My process for writing short stories, novels is the same. Like I outline, with the same degree of like attention. It's just there's less short story, less novella than there is of a novel. So. Do I have any more plans for Simon Fabry? I think it'd be cool to go back. That was fun. I really love that story. Gutter Ballet is super fun. So Gene Wolfe has always been a pretty big inspiration. Yeah, me or GGK should do a book based on the Greco-Bactrians. It is amazing that he hasn't, honestly. That's like just like right there waiting for Guy K to do. Andrew, I have like pretty mixed feelings about Andor. When Andor is good, it is very good. But when Andor, it is mostly nothing happening. Andor is longer than the original trilogy, and it tells about 2% as much story. The like heist episode is great. The prison break episode is great. But like the other 10 are mostly just there. I do appreciate, however, that they took the Empire seriously as villains and wrote them like competent adults in government, as opposed to clowns, which has been how they have been written, with the exception of the Jedi games since the Disney takeover. We got a super chat. Master Ruiz, thank you. I just want to say thanks for writing the books. You should ever check out the start of Exodus for a clue about Silk's true identity. Maybe related to someone you mentioned tonight. I know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about. I did get that far in my Alzbo soup listening. What do I think about Tolkien's opinions on Dune? So we don't really know what Tolkien's opinion on Dune is. The note only says he disliked it with some intensity. There's a lot of speculating that he on why he didn't like it. I suspect that he doesn't like it for a few reasons. I suspect among them is that like Frank's Arabic is not very good. I have a friend who speaks it pretty thoroughly. He detests Dune for this reason. But but I suspect the basic problem is that it is cynical and Tolkien is not. And I think that he doesn't like it because it's a spiritually, let's say, ugly work from Tolkien's perspective. And I think maybe I like to tell myself that like Tolkien identified the same thing that like I identified in Dune and wanted to talk about when I wrote this. Now, that being said, I don't think Tolkien would like Sun Eater either, for different reasons. That keeps me up at night sometimes. I just want to be proud of me, you know. Um, but you know, so but I like broadly think that if that's what it is, then like I get it, right? But if it's like something else, like we don't really know. By contrast, my understanding is that Tolkien liked Conan, so another reason to go read Conan. Uh, I really want to watch Legend of the Glocky Heroes one of these days. When are we getting a Crim backstory? Yeah, that's one I want to get to for sure. That's one I want to get to for sure. Uh, uh, doo-doo-doo. Uh, the Discord link isn't working. I keep forgetting about that every time I copy the old description that link is dead now. We need to get a new one. I used to be on the Discord server, so it was an easy thing for me to do. But now I need to, Orion, if you're still here, I need to get a new Discord link. If you could send it to me, I'll update it. Brr. Is it okay if I write a review of the series with several Italian jokes? Somebody did. There's one. It was I didn't know whether to laugh or like be like deeply wounded. It was like every now and then a mere Italian like looks up from his spaghetti and decides to do something great. And I was like, what? I just didn't know how to handle that at all. But have I ever sat down and diagnosed how Bujold and Wolf can write short books with so much content? It's a skill. Yeah, it's because of the way they write, right? They don't waste words, and a lot of writers, like myself included, waste words. Um, you know, so it's one of those reasons you should like totally go read Conan. Like you want to see stuff that does not waste um any words ever. Yeah. When is the movie coming? Sounds like a boomer question. It sure is. It sure is. God bless him. I could write a chapter a week for years. I probably could do that. A chapter a week is about right. Because I write between 10 and 12,000 words a week usually at the moment. It used to be more than that. My chapters are between 3 and 10,000 words long, and so it would be possible for me to keep up with that schedule. I don't know how I would implement that if I did something like oh what's it called the like newsletter social media platform everybody's got people subscribing to now. I don't remember. But or you could do something like Kindle Vella or something like that. Substack, that's the one. Did something like a Substack. I don't know. But I don't know. I like books and I like would like to write books. So um, yeah, it is weird how mad people in comment sections get about the references. It's so baffling to me that people like don't understand the difference between an illusion and plagiarism, and that illusions are very normal. And like the whole point was for you to like understand when you know that they were references. Like it wasn't like it's not a trick, right? Let's see, we are at 2 hours, so I'm gonna do a few more and then call it for the night if that's okay with everybody. Um, let's see. Would you consider releasing a Spotify playlist for book 7 that follows the tone of the outline plot? I think I best leave that to readers. I think, you know, rather than try to do that because um, I don't know that that's a skill that I have. um, I I listen to songs because I like the song, not because of like I have a correspondence with the work in my head. That's not something my brain does very easily. Uh, yeah. Um, let's see. Will we ever see a novella from Alexander the Emperor's point of view? We might see a novelette. Those characters will be in rotation for the backup stories in the Diamond editions, which my patrons get to vote on. What is the place currently to get some comprehensive lore on the Silent Empire? There is not one. The books, basically. I keep threatening to put stuff on the lore tab on my website, but like the question I have to ask myself every day is, am I going to write something for the lore tab on the website, or am I going to write the books? And I like always choose the books. So, and I don't. There's videos of my work. So, yet anyway, um, you know, so yeah. So there, I'm afraid there isn't one, but things may change. Stanley says, I love the fact I can let my teenager read your books. The swearing is in a foreign language and the sex scenes cut away. Most of the swearing is in foreign languages. There's some. I just wrote a Polino story, which is quite Polino. But that is really good to hear. How many books are left after Just Quiet Gods? One. I am almost done. And I am Stanley. I'm happy not to lecture at you. The story is the thing, you know. Getting ready to start Howling Dark. EOS was excellent, but do I even know what kind of path I'm getting ready to go down? No, it takes a pretty sharp left turn. Let's see. We got another super chat, and I will go on. We still have 85 people here. Why don't I do like 10 more minutes, and then we'll wrap it up. It seems fair. Super chat. That's right. Kaladin, will I ever stream a game like, for example, the Elden Ring DLC? Maybe. I tried to, but I could not figure out how to get the technical stuff to work out. I am also like not great at Elden Ring, so yeah, maybe. And if I did, I wouldn't be the first playthrough. Like, I don't want to be a game streamer, right? And so I don't like. I play Elden Ring to play with my friend, right, and enjoy the game. And I don't know that I want to make that part of work necessarily, but it could happen, sure. I was going to originally. People were saying that, like, Pierce Brown was, and I was hoping I could maybe go get him, right? But I ended up not doing that. So, but maybe one day, Would love to see the books carry on past the point of current narration being done. Any chance we'll see that? Perhaps a new adventure with Selene. No comment on Selene, but I do intend basically to go forward and not backwards. Prequels are almost always pointless. I might do stuff earlier in the timeline, but it wouldn't impinge necessarily on the Sealson Wars precisely and be part of the same plot, so to speak. Yeah, Casey, you're right. I need to just stop talking about Dune. That's what I should do. My official position is it is a book that I like, but like less now than I did when I was 15. Anyway, do I ever find myself all oscillating between a vomit the words out mood and a slow, deliberate drafting mood? I'm mostly right at the same speed all the time. Sometimes I realize I'm getting too rewritey and going back and circling on things, and I tell myself I'll fix it, in post, and have to push myself to move forward. It seems wild the Empire has not developed better counters for the Dahte. Would the Chantry not approve of mindless decoy drones with heat signatures? This is an interesting thought. It might be a gray area. The general, I've seen this critique come up frequently about how, like, the stories take place over 1,000 years and like nothing changes technologically. There's like a reason for that. There's a reason for that. We'll get there eventually. What's my take on Battlestar Galactica? I have never seen it. Is my take on it. What is my favorite metal band these days? Oh, we have a new. I'll answer that first. My favorite metal band will always be will always be Black Sabbath. But particularly the Dio incarnation. I think that's when Dio is at his strongest. Because I'm a Dio guy, and I will always be a Dio guy. But as far as like current bands go, I love Judicator, and I love Visigoth. I love Ambush. Enforcer's really good. Talking like the new wave bands, right? But like I'm mostly like a classics guy, right? Like I love Judas Priest, I love Iron Maiden. I love Wasp. Should say that too loudly, maybe, but I love Wasp. Some just great stuff. But as far as the new bands go, Adjudicator's probably my favorite. They're like pretty small, but they did a concept album about Belisarius and Justinian. Like that was clearly for me, right? So you got another super chat here. Orkhammer says, "Take my money." Well, thank you, Orkhammer. I will. Thank you kindly. How did I connect with Samuel Rukin? Do I always get to choose who reads the audiobooks? So it depends. I chose John Lee for the UK audiobooks, but Samuel Rukin was chosen by the publisher. So I've never spoken with him actually, except to send audio files of pronunciations every book. That's the extent of my contact with him. But he is tremendous. So, what is my Elden Ring build at the moment? I am doing a Black Flame Pyromancer with the Cross Naginata. It's kind of a pretty standard build. I know a lot of people run that one, but it's very fun. The Pyromancy spells are great. So, yeah. Do I have a trunk novel? Yes. When I was in middle school, I wrote a like science fantasy book that's very bad that I have one printed copy of and will never see the light of day. But I have a couple of short stories I've been banking for the omnibus as well. So some new stories there. Ever thought about movie TV deals? I think about them, yeah, but nothing's happened. The Tony Martin Sabbath albums are getting remixes released. Did they by chance release the Tony Martin version of Dehumanizer that exists that we've never heard? Because if they did, I will be there. I'll be there day one. So I'll be there day one. But I probably will get them anyway. Tony Martin is so underappreciated. In terms of like pure vocal range, he's the best vocalist they ever had. Yeah. Anyway, but I actually reached the bottom of the chat, so since we're over time anyway, unless someone has like one more question, I think I might wrap it up. And we got Stanley, who is really MVP of this stream here. What is the percentage of conversion sales on doing live streams with booktubers? So I don't know precisely, like 1-to-1. But my attitude towards booktube generally, besides gratitude, right, has been that I should just like do as much as possible. Be everywhere I can be. And like I've never said no to an interview. It didn't matter if someone had 500,000 subscribers or 8. Because I like, I like want to be here, right? So and I think it's worked. I don't know what the like ROI in terms of like time spent versus income is done, but I am selling way more books now because of it, and so that has been it's also something I didn't really do. It's really like down to Mike too. So like Mike doing that first Mike doing that first review really like opened the door. So I don't have a good sense of like 1-to-1 like what doing one live stream is going to mean, because it's also like a shadow effect, right? There you see a spike on like an individual review coming out or like individual live stream happening, and usually the reviews do better in terms of converting to actual immediate sales than the live streams do. Sorry, I'm just keep seeing the chat. But in terms of figuring out exactly how many people are buying the book because of X or Y, it's very hard to track. Very hard to track. Besides looking at like individual weeks, like, oh, this week this many books sold, which I can't do anymore. When Daw was at Penguin Random House, I could see weekly sales, and now they have a new owner, I can't see anymore. Last. I know that was the last question, but there was another one I like wanted to answer real quick. I saw. Where'd it go? Oh, no dehumanizer. Man, that's sad. Is Hadrian an elf now? No. No, sorry. He is not. Anyway, but that will that I think will wrap it up for this evening, everybody. We're over time a little bit, and my wife is, I'm sure, wondering why I'm still up here. So I need to go find her and tell her I'm sorry for being up so late. So y'all, I will see you all very soon. Man, I left this like too late in the month, so I'll have to make a YouTube video like a couple days for the next update since the last one was so late. All right, everyone, until next time, ladies and gentlemen, Godspeed.